The 3rd Armored Division was an armored division of the United States Army. Unofficially nicknamed the 3rd, the division was first activated in 1941, and was active in the European theater of World War II. The division was stationed in West Germany for much of the Cold War, and participated in the Persian Gulf War. On 17 January 1992 in Germany, the division ceased operations. In October 1992 it was formally deactivated as part of a general drawing down of forces at the end of the Cold War. World War II order of battle. The 3rd Armored Division was organized as a heavy armored division, as was its counterpart, the 2nd Armored Division. Later, higher-numbered U.S. armored divisions of World War II were smaller, with a higher ratio of armored infantry to tanks, based on lessons of the fighting in North Africa. As a heavy division, the 3rd Armored possessed 2 armored regiments totaling 4 medium tank battalions and 2 of light tanks instead of 3 tank battalions, containing both 232 medium tanks instead of the 168 allotted a light armored division, and with attached units numbered over 16,000 men, instead of the normal 12,000 found in the light armored divisions. Each division type had an infantry component of 3 mechanized infantry battalions. The division's core units were the 36th Armored Infantry Regiment, the 32nd Armored Regiment, the 33rd Armored Regiment, the 23rd Armored Engineer Battalion, the 83rd Armored Reconnaissance Battalion, and the 143rd Armored Signal Company. During World War II, these were organized operationally into task forces known as Combat Commands A, B and A, as in the light divisions. In addition to the core units, a number of other units of various kinds were attached to the division during various operations. During 1944 and 1945, the units comprising the 3rd Armored Division included combat units: 32nd Armored Regiment, 33rd Armored Regiment, 36th Armored Infantry Regiment, 54th Field Artillery Battalion, 67th Field Artillery Battalion, 391st Field Artillery Battalion, 143rd Signal Battalion, 23rd Armored Engineer Battalion, 83rd Armored Reconnaissance Battalion. Headquarters Units: Headquarters Company, 3rd Armored Division, Service Company, 3rd Armored Division, Division Trains Supply Battalion, 45th Armored Medical Battalion, 503rd Intelligence Corps. Attached units: 643rd Tank Destroyer Battalion, 703rd Tank Destroyer Battalion, 803rd Tank Destroyer Battalion, 413th AAA Gun Battalion, 486th AAA Auto Weapons Battalion. Training timeline: the division was activated on 15 April 1941 at Camp Beauregard, Louisiana. In June 1941, it moved to Camp Polk, Louisiana. On 9 March 1942, it came under Army Ground Forces and was assigned to the 2nd Armored Corps. In July 1942, it was transferred to Camp Young, CA, and from August to October 1942, took part in maneuvers at the Desert Training Center. It left Camp Young in January 1943 and moved to the Indiantown Gap Military Reservation, Pennsylvania. The 3rd AD arrived in the European theater on 15 September 1943, conducting pre-invasion training in the Liverpool and Bristol areas. It remained in Somerset, England until 24 June 1944, when it departed to partake in the Normandy operations. According to the book Plain Soldiering by N. D.G. James, which deals with the armed forces on Salisbury Plain, the division's units, while in England from September 1943 until July 1944, mainly in Wiltshire. The HQ was probably at Warminster, with units in 5 Wiltshire villages and 3 villages in Somerset. There is a small memorial at Mere in Wiltshire. Into battle. The first elements of the 3rd Armoured in France saw combat on the 29th of June, with the division as a whole beginning combat operations on the 9th of July 1944. During this time, it was under the command of 7th Corps and 18th Airborne Corps for some time, and assigned to the 1st Army and the 12th Army Group for the duration of its career. The division spearheaded the U.S. 1st Army through Normandy, taking part in a number of engagements, notably including the Battle of St. Lo, where it suffered significant casualties. After facing heavy fighting in the hedgerows, and developing methods to overcome the vast thickets of brush and earth that constrained its mobility, the unit broke out at Marigny, alongside the 1st Infantry Division, and swung south to Mayenne. The engineers and maintenance crews took the large I-beam invasion barriers from the beaches at Normandy and used the beams to weld large crossing rams on the front of the Sherman tanks. They would then hit the hedgerows at high speed, bursting through them without exposing the vulnerable underbellies of the tanks. Until this happened, they could not get across the hedgerows. Ordered to help close the Falaise Gap and Argenton Pocket, which contained the German 7th Army, the division finished the job near Poudonges by the 18th of August. 6 days later, the outfit had sped through Corville and Chartres and was located at the banks of the Seine River. On the night of the 25th of August 1944, the crossing of the Seine by the division started. Once over, the 3rd slugged its way across France, reaching Belgium on the 2nd of September 1944. Liberated in the path of the division were Meaux, Soissons, Laon, Marle, Mons, Charleroi, Namur and Liege. It was at Mons that the division cut off 40,000 Wehrmacht troops and captured 8,000 prisoners. Then the division began the first invasion of Germany since the days of Napoleon, is a claim often repeated and derives from 1947 U.S. Army literature that ignored earlier acts such as the 5th Armored Division's reconnaissance into Germany on the 11th of September 1944. French troops entering the Saarland in September 1939 during the Saar Offensive, and the entry into Germany by Imperial Russian troops in 1914. Hergen and the Bulge. On the 10th of September 1944, the Spearhead Division fired what it claimed was the first American field artillery shell of the war onto German soil. 2 days later it passed the German border and soon breached the Siegfried Line, taking part in the Battle of Hergen Forest. The 3rd Armored Division continued fighting during the Battle of the Bulge, far north of the deepest German penetration. The division fought south in an attack designed to help wipe out the Bulge and bring 1st Army's line abreast of Patton's 3rd Army fighting northward toward Houflies. It severed a vital highway leading to Saint-Vith and later reached Liénau, Belgique, where it halted to refit into the German heartland. After a month of rest, the division continued its offensive to the east, and on the 26th of February, Spearhead rolled back inside Germany as both combat commands bolted across the Roer River and seized several towns, crossed the Erft Canal, and at last broke through to the Rhine River to capture Cologne by the 7th of March. 2 weeks later it crossed the Rhine south of Cologne at Honne. On the 31st of March, the commander of the division, Major General Maurice Rose, rounded a corner in his jeep and found himself face to face with a German tank. As he withdrew his pistol either to throw it to the ground or in an attempt to fight back, a young German tank commander, apparently misunderstanding Rose's intentions, shot their general. Beyond Cologne, the division swept up Paderborn in its advance, to shut the back door to the Ruhr pocket. In April, the division crossed the Saale River, north of Halle, and sped on toward the Elbe River. On the 11th of April 1945, the 3rd Armored discovered the Dora Mittelbau concentration camp. The division first arrived on the scene, reporting back to headquarters that it had uncovered a large concentration camp near the town of Nordhausen, requesting help from the 104th Infantry Division. The 3rd immediately began transporting some 250 ill and starving prisoners to nearby hospital facilities. The last major fighting in the war for the division was the Battle of Dessau, which the division captured on the 23rd of April 1945 after 3 days of combat. Following the action at Dessau, the division moved into Corps Reserve at Sandgerhausen. Occupational duty near Langen was given the division following VE Day, a role it filled until inactivation on the 10th of November 1945. Combat statistics. The 3rd Armored Division had 231 days of combat in World War II, with a total of 2,540 killed, 7,331 wounded, 95 missing, and 139 captured. Total battle and non-battle casualties came to 16,122. The 3rd Armored Division lost more tanks in combat than any other U.S. division. Combat Command A lost more tanks than any other unit in the 3rd Armored Division. Individual awards: Distinguished Service Crosses 17, Legions of Merit 23, Silver Stars 885, Soldiers Medal 32, Bronze Stars 3,884. Purple Hearts in excess of 10,500. Air Medals 138. Distinguished Flying Crosses 3. Division Commanders during World War II: Major General Alvin C. Gillum, Jr. April 1941 to January 1942. Major General Walton H. Walker, January 1941 to August 1942. Major General Leroy R. Watson, August 1942 to August 1944. Major General Morris Rose, August 1944 to March 1945. Kia. Brigadier General Doyle O. Hickey, March to June 1945. Brigadier General Truman E. Boudinot, June and Amp, July 1945. Brigadier General Frank A. Allen, Jr., July 1945. Major General Robert W. Grow, July 1945 until inactivation. Cold War. The division was reactivated on the 15th of July 1947 at Fort Knox, Kentucky to act as training formation. In 1955, the III.The Armored Division was reorganized for combat and shipped to Germany the next year. It replaced the 4th Infantry Division under a program called Operation Gyroscope. It was the first U.S. Armored Division to be stationed east of the Rhine River in the Cold War. The III.The Armored Division, headquartered at Frankfurt am Main, served in Cold War Germany for approximately 36 years, from May 1956 to July 1992. With the exception of the time spent in Desert Storm, the three main combat forces headquarters for the 3rd AD were Kaserne at Kirchgans and Schloss Kaserne at Butzbach, Coleman Kaserne at Gelnhausen, and Ray-Barracks at Friedberg. Note: the 1963 road reorganization included organizational changes within the 3rd AD's 3 combat commands, plus a name changeover to brigades, e.g. Combat Command A became 1st Brigade. According to Carl Lowe in his www.USARMyGermany.com article, in 1976 the Army wanted to move the 2nd Brigade's home station from Gelnhausen to Alsfeld, which lies in the northern advance route for Soviet forces out of the Fulda Gap. However, the Germans wouldn't agree to a major share in building brigade facilities at Alsfeld, so the plan was dropped. The 3rd Armored's primary mission during the May 1956 to July 1992 period was, in the event of war, to defend the Fulda Gap, alongside other NATO elements, against numerically superior Warsaw Pact forces. In June 1962, USAR-EUR maxed out its Cold War troop strength. That number was never achieved again. Also in June 1962, the nuclear warheads for the Davy Crockett's arrived in USAR-EUR. In late October 1962, during the Cuban crisis, there was no hotline between Washington and Moscow. Soviet forces, including those in the group of Soviet forces Germany, were placed on the highest alert level. 2 of the 5 armies in the GSFG were positioned to advance through the Fulda Gap. These were the 8th Guards Army and 1st Guards Tank Army, to prepare the defenses against an invasion. The 3rd Armored Division's units frequently conducted field training in Bavaria at Hohenfels Training Center, Hohenfels, Bavaria, Wildflecken Training Center and Grafen War Training Center, conducting exercises of live fire, movement and communications. Throughout its time in Cold War Germany, beginning in mid-1956, the division would also frequently take to the German countryside for training maneuvers, including, beginning in January 1969, what became an annually staged wargame Reforger, which simulated invasion of Western Europe by Warsaw Pact forces. Note: as indicated in the yearly issues during the Vietnam War of Annual Historical Summary, Headquarters United States Army, Europe and 7th Army, the USAR-EUR training maneuver budgets dramatically dried up during the Vietnam War years. Significantly reduced training funds were first mentioned in the 1st of January to the 31st of December 1966 edition of the USAR-EUR Annual Historical Summary. At the peak of 1980s East-West tensions, as many as 19 Soviet and East German divisions faced off against NATO forces in the area. Throughout the Cold War, the division headquarters Company 503D Adjutant General Co. and 503 DMP Co. were based on Drake Kaserne, with 143rd Signal BN, and other support units stationed across the street at Edwards Kaserne in Frankfurt, West Germany. A number of its subunits were based in other casernes throughout the German state of Hessen, notably Ayers Kaserne at Kirchgans and Schloss Kaserne at Butzbach, Gelnhausen, Ray Barracks at Friedberg and Fliegerhorst near Hanau. The NCO Academy contained 2 companies. Co A was assigned to the medieval castle at Usingen-Kransberg, while Co. B was located in Butzbach. The division itself comprised an average of 15,000 soldiers, organized into 3 combat commands later renamed brigades, organizations of comparable size to the World War II combat commands. These brigades were individually manned by at least 1 battalion each of infantry, armor and artillery, and various supporting units, notably including medical, engineering, and aviation elements. The division was also assigned the dedicated 533rd Military Intelligence (CEWI) Battalion by 1980. replacing the 503rd Me Company that previously supported the division intelligence staff. Most of the caserns were located adjacent to or within German communities, leading to lively trade and interaction between soldiers and German civilians. A few, however, were somewhat remotely located, particularly Ayers Caserne, where the 1st Brigade was stationed, outside Kirchgurns. The most famous soldier in the 3rd Armored Division during the 1950s was Elvis Presley, assigned to Company A, 1st Medium Tank Battalion, 32nd Armor Regiment, Combat Command Sea-Tray Barracks in Friedberg. After his time in service, Presley made the movie G.I. Blues, in which he portrays a 3rd Armored Division tank crewman with little field duty but with much opportunity for singing, particularly at Frankfurt. In real life, Presley was promoted to Sergeant E5 near the end of his tour in Germany, without having attended the II.The NCO Academy. In the movie, he wears the E5 insignia of a Spec 5 rather than a Sergeant E5. Colin Powell also served in the division. He was assigned to the II.The Armored Rifle Battalion, 48th Infantry, Combat Command B, Coleman Caserne, Gelnhausen, between 1958 and AMP 1960. It started out with his first Army Command assignment as an infantry platoon leader. By 1990, communism in Eastern Europe collapsed, the two German states reunited, and the Soviet army was being withdrawn back to the Soviet Union. With these events, the Cold War came to a peaceful conclusion, freeing U.S. Army units in Europe for other deployments. Desert Storm. In response to the changing Cold War scenario, II.The was instructed to begin selective standing down of various division elements during the summer of 1990. Some units, for example 3-5 Battalion, had turned in equipment across levels with other II.The units by August 1990, when momentous events in the Middle East developed. That month, Iraq invaded Kuwait, and soon after, President George H.W. Bush committed U.S. troops to the theater, first to defend Saudi Arabia, and then to eject Iraqi troops from Kuwait. Deployment of advance elements of II.The began in December, with the remaining deploying units arriving by January. Units that had drawn down were replaced or augmented back to full strength. As an example, 3-5 was replaced by the 8th Infantry Division's 5-3 Battalion. Other units were attached to II.The to bring it up to, and even beyond, full strength. Redeployment and retraining. The 3rd Armored Division, then commanded by Major General Paul Funk, was one of 4 U.S. heavy divisions deployed with 7th Corps. The division and its equipment were shifted from Germany to Saudi Arabia, with in some cases, Army National Guard and Army Reserve elements taking over some of the duties in Germany, while in others, caserns were left virtually empty. This massive redeployment was possible by the end of the Cold War. After redeployment, the division acclimated to the desert climate, and its troops face new challenges in mobility, tactics and maintenance in a sandy and hot climate. Various National Guard and Army Reserve units were then attached to the division for the duration of the conflict, swelling the division's size to over 20,000 troops, 25% larger than during its time in Germany. The majority of the division's troops never received desert battle dress uniforms due to a shortage, and fought instead in lightweight summer woodland pattern uniforms, covered by tanker suits or chemical warfare protective MOPP suits. Pre-deployment order of battle: 1st Brigade, Headquarters and Headquarters Company, 1st Brigade 4th Battalion, 32nd Armored Regiment, 3rd Battalion, 5th Cavalry Regiment, 5th Battalion, 5th Cavalry Regiment. 2nd Brigade HHC, 2nd Brigade 3rd Battalion, 8th Cavalry Regiment, 4th Battalion, 8th Cavalry Regiment, 4th Battalion, 18th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Brigade HHC, 3rd Brigade 2nd Battalion, 67th Armour Regiment, 4th Battalion, 67th Armour Regiment, 5th Battalion, 18th Infantry Regiment, Aviation Brigade HHC, Aviation Brigade, 4th Squadron, 7th Cavalry Regiment, 2nd Battalion, 227th Aviation Regiment, 3rd Battalion, 227th Aviation Regiment, 9th Battalion, 227th Aviation Regiment, Task Force Viper Division Artillery Headquarters and Headquarters Battery, DIVARTY, a battery, 40th Field Artillery Regiment F Battery, 333rd Field Artillery Regiment 2nd Battalion, 3rd Field Artillery Regiment, 2nd Battalion, 82nd Field Artillery Regiment 4th Battalion, 82nd Field Artillery Regiment, Division Support Command HHC, DISCOM, 22nd Chemical Company 503rd Forward Support Battalion 54th Forward Support Battalion 45th Forward Support Battalion 122nd Main Support Battalion, Division Troops HHC, 3rd Armored Division 3rd Armored Division Band 503rd Military Police Company 23rd Engineer Battalion 143rd Signal Battalion, 533rd Military Intelligence Battalion 3rd Battalion, 5th Air Defense Artillery Regiment. Attached units 302nd RAOC 323 Chemical Company, 148th Public Affairs Detachment IDARNG 369th Personnel Service Company SECO, 17th Signal Battalion 4th Battalion, 34th Armour Regiment, 3rd Battalion, 20th Field Artillery Regiment 12th Engineer Battalion 43rd Explosive Ordnance Detachment, 5th Battalion, 3rd Air Defense Artillery Regiment. Into battle. Finally, after months of training, the division moved to the line of departure, alongside the 1st Armored Division on its left flank and the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment on its right flank, while the Iraqi army concentrated much of its defenses in and around Kuwait itself. The 3rd AD and 7th Corps launched a massive armored attack into Iraq, just to the west of Kuwait, taking the Iraqis completely by surprise. Scouts from 2nd Brigade crossed on the afternoon of the 23rd of February 1991 just after 1,500 hours. Less than 2 hours later, they had penetrated several miles into Iraq and managed to capture over 200 prisoners. On the 24th of February, the official first day of action, the division as a whole swung into action as part of a coordinated attack by hundreds of thousands of Allied troops. During the first day of battle, the 3rd Armored Division pushed 18 miles into Iraq, taking over 200 prisoners. By dawn of the second day, an additional 50 prisoners had been taken, with scouts reporting enemy reinforcements moving to meet the division. Second day, at 1,115 hours of the second day, all elements of the division were finally across the line of departure. The day was marked by hard pushing to penetrate deep and fast, striking for an objective south of Basra. In the course of its drive, various elements of the division engaged the enemy, taking prisoners, skirmishing, sometimes bypassing enemy strongholds to gain ground, other time engaging in full-scale battle. By nightfall of the second day, 03 AD had driven 53 miles into Iraq, with dozens of enemy vehicles destroyed, hundreds of POWs captured, and was on the verge of achieving its first objective, an accomplishment that war planners had not anticipated. Third day. On the third day of combat, the 26th of February, the division closed in upon its objective and faced for the first time the Iraqi Republican Guard, a much stronger foe than the forces the division had first engaged, and less inclined to retreat or surrender. Opposing forces included the highly touted Republican Guard II.The Division, the Iraqi 52nd Armored Division and elements of the 17th and the 10th Armored Divisions. The division engaged in full-scale tank battles for the first time since World War II, and as one of the division's veteran states, there was more than enough action for everyone. Action continued after nightfall, and by 1,840 hours, the ground and air elements of the 3rd AD could report over 20 tanks, 14 APCs, several trucks and some artillery pieces destroyed. Unfortunately, that same evening, the 4th Battalion, II.The armor lost the division's first casualties in a Bradley fighting vehicle to 25mm cannon fire, with 2 soldiers killed and 3 wounded. During the night, both darkness and sandstorms hampered soldiers' visibility. Good thermal sighting systems on board the M1A1 Abrams tanks and Bradleys allowed gunners to knock out Iraqi targets. 4th and 5th days. By the 4th day, the division reached its objective and pursued its now retreating enemy. The division turned east into Kuwait, continuing to inflict heavy casualties and capture troops as it rolled forward, often hitting new units whose defensive berms and foxholes face south from the northern flank, rendering the defenses ineffective. By nightfall, forces facing III AD had been virtually eliminated, with the remnants in full retreat. By the 5th day of combat, the division had achieved all objectives and continued to push east to block Iraqi retreat from Kuwait, conducting mopping-up operations. 100 hours after the ground campaign started, President Bush declared a ceasefire. Spearhead at the height of the battle, the 3rd Armored Division included 32 battalions and 20,533 troops. It was the largest coalition division in the Gulf War and the largest U.S. Armored Division in history. In its moving arsenal were 360 Abrams main battle tanks, 340 Bradley fighting vehicles, 128 self-propelled 155mm howitzers, 27 Apache attack helicopters, 9 multiple launch rocket systems, and more. In the 100-hour Gulf War, 3rd AD destroyed hundreds of Iraqi tanks and vehicles, and captured more than 2,400 Iraqi prisoners. 15 troops of the 3rd AD were killed between December 1990 and late February 1991. In 1991, division historian Dan Peterson, comparing the performance of the division in World War II and Desert Storm, stated, "History does always repeat itself. 3rd Armored Division was the spearhead in both wars." Following the war, 3rd Armored Division was one of the first units rotated to Camp Doha, Kuwait, providing protection to Kuwait as it rebuilt. Retirement. Following Desert Storm, a number of the division's units were transferred to the 1st Armored Division. On the 17th of January 1992, the 3rd Armored Division officially ceased operations in Germany, with a ceremony in Frankfurt at division headquarters. Drake Kasern: "Sir, this is my final salute. Mission accomplished," said Marge. Gen. Jerry Rutherford, the division commander. Rutherford preceded the final salute to General Crosby E. St. USAREUR commander, with a loudly shouted "Spearhead." The division colors were then returned to the United States, with the 3rd AD still officially active, since Army regulations state that divisional casing of colors cannot occur on foreign soil. Official retirement took place at Fort Knox on the 17th of October 1992. In attendance at the ceremony were several former spearhead commanding generals, and division veterans from all eras. In a traditional ceremony, Command Sergeant Major Richard L. Ross, holding the division color with battle streamers, passed it to General Frederick M. Franks, Jr., completing the official retirement of the division, and the 3rd Armored Division was removed from the official force structure of the U.S. Army.